Hello, everybody. I'm your beloved storyteller back with another story. DoorDash. It's very popular nowadays, and people used to say, don't take things from strangers. But now, in today's standard, it's buy these things from strangers and invite them over to your house, but pay them to come to your house so you can take these objects from these strangers. It's a very normal practice by today's standards. But what people least expect is the dangerous aspect of this job. Not because people are saving lives or because they're running into danger, but because it's unpredictable. So, in today's story, we'll be looking at our young protagonist, Daniel Mercer, who got more than just a tip from one of his customers. So, with all that being said, there are a few trigger warnings, such as guns and blood, so viewer discretion is advised. So now that that's all out of the way, let us begin. Daniel Mercer, age 24, had a delivery job for DoorDash. He was doing DoorDash for long enough to know that people became strangely more brave when standing behind their own front door. Most nights, it didn't bother him. He had been blamed for missing drinks he had never been handed, cold fries that were sealed inside a bag he wasn't allowed to open, and restaurants taking too long, traffic lights staying red, and once somebody yelled at him for the rain. Daniel had learned the safest response: apologize, take the picture, and complete the order. Then leave. It wasn't worth arguing, at least that's what he usually told himself. But on Thursday night in October, Daniel accepted an order just before midnight. $11 and some change. 7 miles. Not great, not terrible. He had already decided it would be his last delivery of the night. The order came through from a burger restaurant across the other side of town. When Daniel arrived, the lobby was closed, which forced him into the drive-thru that barely moved. He waited 23 minutes, approximately. And by the time an employee finally handed him the bag through the window, the bottom of it was already beginning to turn translucent with grease. Daniel checked the receipt. 1 burger, a large fry, a chicken sandwich, and 2 drinks. Everything that he could see appeared to be there. So he drove to the address. The house sat near the end of a residential street, lined with older homes packed closely together. Most of those windows were dark. Daniel parked along the curb. His phone read 11:47 p.m. The instructions said simply, "Hand it to me." So he grabbed the bag and the drinks and walked up a short concrete path. He climbed 3 stairs and knocked. Nothing. He waited. Then he knocked again. And then a light came on somewhere inside. He heard locks begin to turn, and then the door opened. A man stood there wearing sweatpants and a faded gray shirt. He looked to be somewhere in his 30s. Daniel held out the bag. "DoorDash." The man took it without answering. Daniel handed him the drinks next. "Have a good night." He turned toward the steps. "Hold up." Daniel stopped. The man had opened the bag. "Where's the sauce?" Daniel looked back. What sauce? The sauce I ordered. If it's not in the bag, the restaurant probably forgot it. The man stared at him. So you didn't check? The bags are sealed, sir. We're not supposed to open them. You expect a tip when you can't even check an order? Daniel felt his jaw tighten. There it was. He had heard some version of that sentence hundreds of times, and normally he would have apologized, and normally he would have walked away. But it was almost midnight, and he had spent nearly a half hour sitting in a drive-thru. His back hurt, and his gas light had come on 10 minutes earlier. And something about the way the man said it irritated him. Look, sir, Daniel said, I don't make the food. I just bring it to you. The man's expression changed. Then don't expect a tip. Daniel gave a tired laugh. You already didn't tip. Daniel immediately regretted saying that. Not because it was particularly cruel, but because something changed the man's face. Daniel turned away. Whatever, have a good night. But a voice came from the doorway. Don't walk away from me. Daniel continued toward the steps. He heard movement behind him, but the man said something Daniel would spend the past few months trying to remember. He could never recall the words, only the tone. Daniel turned around. The gun was already pointed at him. There was no time to understand what he was seeing. There was no warning, no argument anymore. Just a deafening crack. Then Daniel felt something slam into his upper chest near his collarbone. And for an instant there was no pain, only force. His body twisted sideways as it struck the porch railing before collapsing onto the wooden boards. The drinks hit beside him. Ice scattered across the porch, and Daniel stared at it. That was what he remembered most afterward, was ice. Little pieces sliding across through soda and blood. Then the pain arrived. It was enormous, hot, deep. Daniel tried to breathe. He could. That surprised him. He sucked in another breath, then another. His hand went to his chest. Warm blood immediately coated his fingers. The bullet had entered high near his collarbone and tore through his muscle. It exited through the back of his shoulder. By the sheer chance it had missed the structures that could have killed him within minutes. But Daniel didn't know that. He only knew he had been shot. He looked toward the doorway. The man was still standing there. Neither of them moved. Daniel expected another shot, but instead the man stepped backwards and the door closed. Then the lock clicked. Daniel laid there staring at it. His ears rang. His heart hammered so violently that he could feel every beat inside the wound. He reached for his phone, but his pocket was empty. He remembered setting it on top of the delivery bag while carrying the drinks. He looked around, and there it was near the door, less than 6 feet away. The screen was still glowing, and Daniel tried to stand. His arm immediately gave out, and he hit the porch. A sound escaped him that he didn't recognize as his own. He looked at the phone, then looked at the door. To reach it, he would have to crawl toward the house, toward the man with the gun. But he wasn't going to. No, he wasn't. His car was parked behind him, and Daniel rolled onto his stomach. He began crawling, One arm pulled and one knee pushed, and then it repeated. And every movement sent pain tearing through his shoulder. He reached the top of the steps. There was no graceful way down. He lowered one leg, then lost his balance and fell. His shoulder struck the concrete, and Daniel screamed. But no lights came on. No neighbors opened a door. He dragged himself toward the sidewalk. His car looked impossibly far away, maybe 40, 50 feet. It might as well have been a mile. But he kept moving. He reached the driver's door and pulled himself upward using his fingers. His hand slipped, once, twice. Finally, the door opened. Daniel collapsed halfway into the seat. For several minutes he laid there, breathing, bleeding. He finally hoisted himself in the seat, trying not to pass out. His keys were still in his pocket. He grabbed them and started the engine. The dashboard illuminated, gas low. Daniel almost laughed. He put the car in drive. He needed a hospital, a police station, a gas station, anything with people. He drove. At least he tried to. But the road blurred and the streetlight stretched into streaks across the windshield. His left hand kept slipping from the steering wheel. He couldn't stop shaking. After several blocks, Daniel realized he had no idea where he was going. So he pulled over, or at least he thought he did. The passenger side tire climbed up on the curb. He stopped the car. He needed help. There had to be someone nearby. Daniel opened the car door and stepped out, his legs folded. He caught himself against the side of the car. He tried to scream for help, but his voice barely carried. Then he tried again, but no one heard him. Daniel stumbled away from the car. He couldn't remember why, but later he would remember fragments. A street lamp, a mailbox, and then the pavement beneath his hands. His own blood pooling onto a white painted line. Then nothing. At 6:18 a.m. the following morning, a woman driving to work noticed something in the road. At first she thought someone had dumped clothing there. Then the shape moved. She slammed her brakes. Daniel was lying partially in the street, several hundred feet away from his car. His clothes were soaked with dried blood, and there was blood on the pavement, blood on his hands, and blood across his face where he had apparently touched it during the night. But he was breathing, but just barely. The woman called 911. Daniel remembered none of what followed. The paramedics, the police, the ambulance, the emergency room. He woke up 2 days later. His mother was sitting beside his bed. There were tubes in his arm. His shoulder was wrapped heavily, and his throat felt like sandpaper. The first thing Daniel asked was whether they had caught him, but his mother didn't understand. The guy, Daniel whispered. His mother looked toward the floor. No. Daniel closed his eyes. The police knew where the shooting happened. They found the blood, the spilled drinks, and the food, even Daniel's phone. But the man Daniel described was gone, and the house complicated everything. The person officially associated with the property wasn't the man Daniel remembered. Detectives followed leads. Daniel looked through photographs. He answered questions again and again and again, and nothing led to an arrest. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel's wound would heal. The bullet had damaged muscles and nerves around his shoulder, leaving him with weakness and numbness running down parts of his arm. Physical therapy helped, but the scar remained. So did the dreams. For a long time, Daniel couldn't hear a knock without thinking about that porch. He stopped delivering. He found a temporary work stocking shelves. The money wasn't enough, though. The bills accumulated. His car payment didn't care that he'd been shot, and neither did rent. Eventually, the DoorDash app found its way back onto his phone, and Daniel stared at it for almost an hour before signing in. His first delivery back was tacos. He nearly canceled it, but instead he drove. The customer asked to leave the food outside. Daniel had never been so grateful for 3 words. Leave at door. He placed the bag down and took the picture and left. Nothing happened. The second delivery was the same, then the third. Days became weeks. The fear never disappeared. It just simply became quieter. Daniel developed habits. He never stood directly in front of a door, and he kept the car running when possible. He paid attention to people's hands. If something felt wrong, he'd leave. But most importantly, he never argued. Ever. Almost 5 months after the shooting, Daniel was working late again. It was 10:32 p.m. when another order appeared. Chinese food, $9, 4 miles. Daniel accepted it. The destination was a motel near the interstate. He had delivered there before. It wasn't dangerous. It was partially nice. Just one of those aging 2-story motels where every room opened directly into an exterior hallway. A blue neon sign buzzed above the parking lot, and half the letters in vacancy weren't working. Daniel parked near the stairs. He checked the order number. Then he checked the receipt. It said deliver to room 214. The customer's name was simply listed as Chris, and the special request said to leave it at the door. He was relieved. That's easy, he thought. Daniel grabbed the bag and climbed the outside staircase. His shoulder complained halfway up, but it always did when the weather was cold. Room 208, 210, 211, 212, and Daniel stopped. Nothing felt wrong. That got him. Because for the first time, nothing felt wrong. There was no instinct warning him. There was no strange cars and no suspicious message. There was no reason to leave. Just another motel room, another delivery, another door. Daniel placed the food on the concrete outside room 214. He pulled out his phone and opened the camera. But before he took the picture, the lock clicked, and Daniel froze. The door opened. A man stood inside, and for the first second, Daniel didn't recognize him. His brain refused to. This wasn't the house. This wasn't the street. This wasn't October. This was a motel beside an interstate 5 months later. The man's hair was longer, and he had a beard now. He looked thinner. Daniel stared. The man stared back. Neither of them spoke. Daniel looked at the number beside the door, 214. He looked down at his phone, room 214. His eyes moved back to the man, and recognition finally struck. Daniel stopped breathing. The porch, the gray shirt, the drinks hitting the floor, the ice sliding through the blood, the gun. Daniel instinctively stepped backward. The man's face changed too. Confusion came first. He hadn't expected Daniel either. For one strange second, they were simply two men trying to understand how the impossible had placed them in front of one another again. Then the confusion left the man's face, and recognition replaced it. His eyes slowly moved downward. They stopped near Daniel's collar. The scar was barely visible above his shirt. The man stared at it, then looked Daniel into the eyes. A faint smile appeared. So you lived. Then the bag slipped from Daniel's hand.